Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Sarah Freeman, Director of Exhibitions at Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and it's my pleasure to present tonight's Artist and Curator conversation with Cathy Cone. Admission for this program is pay as you wish. If you would like to donate to Brattleboro Museum and Art Center to support this and future arts programs, you can do so at brattleboromuseum.org/support. You'll also find information about membership on that page, and a quick plug, May is membership month at BMAC. So if you join or give a gift membership by June 2nd, you'll get 10% off of your membership and receive 2 free months. Members enjoy invitations to special events, discounts at the BMAC gift shop, and free admission to affiliated museums across the country. It's a great time to become a member. This event is presented in connection with the exhibit Cathy Cone, Portraits and Portals, which is on view through June 11th at BMAC. In tonight's program, Cathy and I will discuss the exhibit and her artistic process. If you're joining us here on Zoom or Facebook Live, you're welcome to ask questions at any time, and we'll save time at the end of the talk for questions. To submit a question or comment, if you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A button on your screen. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can type your questions or comments there, and we'll keep an eye on that too. And with that little bit of housekeeping taken care of, I would like to introduce Cathy. Cathy, if you'd like to join me on the screen and turn your camera on.
Hi,
Oh.
Sarah.
Cathy Cone is a photographer and painter. Her surrealist approach to photography began in the late 1970s with the introduction of the Diana camera. This led to an investigation of experimental techniques towards a multidisciplinary approach to her poetic image making. Some of her exhibitions include Weissman Art Museum, the De Cordova Museum, the Griffin Museum of Photography, and the Vermont Center for Photography. Cathy, along with her husband, master printer John Cone, founded Cone Editions Press in 1980 in Port Chester, New York, as a collaborative printmaking workshop. Cone Editions Press is now located in East Topsom. Is that how I'm saying it?
Yes, Topsom.
Okay. Topsom, Vermont, where Cathy is director of the workshops and studio. So thank you. We're thrilled to have Cathy joining us tonight for this program. Welcome, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Cathy, to talk a little bit about the exhibit at BMAC and the different bodies of work that are in there and how they fit together. And while you're talking, I am going to share my screen so that everyone can see some of the images from the exhibit.
Okay.
Okay, bear with us. All right, great, take it away.
Okay, so we're looking at 3 different bodies of work. And the first one is a series called Milking Butterflies. And I start with tintype that I have a collection that I've been massing since around late 70s. And I scan the tintype and then I enlarge it and print it out as an inkjet. And then I paint with gouache on it. So this series, probably there are 2 different sections of it. But I started doing this maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. And the tintypes, they're kind of like time travelers. I love this idea of reimagining them and reinventing them. And the process is, one from the 1800s. And this sort of started this series is I was working with Katie Gass, a curator, and we did an installation of some of these at the Beekman Hotel in New York that she used as part of her work there. I love these tintypes because I love the glance. I feel sort of connected to them. And, I have these late night seances with them. The idea that they're also, I'm able to, through technology, enlarge something that's like the size of a quarter has all these revelations of artifacts in the image itself. This series is called Apparent Close-Up, and I received, along with my husband, a collaborative residency at Tucson Talk last November, and decided just to take my camera. And John, my husband, was doing the master printing. I was responsible for the content, and we collaborated, and we had this, immersion of 3 weeks to do self-portraiture, to have this dialogue about, not only our relationship and our business being 40 years going on, but this idea of, what we were looking at now as ourselves, aging, this process. So the gravure has this thin sheet of film on it. And I began, when I removed the film to do the printing, began cutting the film and using it as a veil. So that's, and I think several of them have. This one, though, I actually rephotographed, and I was stitching it, doing collage. There are around, I think, 23 of these in this series. This one was actually the first one. And then again, just sewing, using, I didn't take anything with me. So I went to like a general store and bought some thread, and this idea of making a mark with thread and then rephotographing, and the eyebrows, like a digital drawing. So there was a combination of using all these different ways of drawing and making a mark. And this one, yeah, that one was, I think, 2 different plates that we used to make that image. And again, so just having this opportunity to be immersed in this beautiful space was just quite a gift. And this series, this is the 3rd series that is in this, in the Portals and Portraits. And this is the platinum print that I then painted with gouache on, or used a digital file to then overprint. And a lot of them either I will paint on or make a digital image. And this series is called The Others, and there's, I think, 24 in this series. So all of these 3 series we're looking at are alternative processes that are old. The gravure is about 500 years old. Then there's platinum, and then the tintypes, of course, in the 1850s, but all of them reimagined using, technology. And I find that kind of really interesting, that they're all these older processes kind of having this conversation together in a different way. And I think that's why I sort of I think about them as like time travelers.
I'm curious to hear more about how you started collecting tintypes. Mm-hmm. And then kind of further to that, how, what you see in them, and kind of how, if when you're collecting them, you're already thinking about how you're going to use them.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started, I was also collecting musical instruments, and my husband was collecting daguerreotypes. And I mean, they have these, they're beautiful objects. I'm intrigued by, I think, the glance mainly. Like when I look for a tintype that I want to use, there's something, like it could be my neighbor. It could be, there's something so, I think contemporary in them, even though, I mean, they're transient, but they have this appearance of, that glance, like I think that's initially like what moves me to select one. Yeah.
I'm also really interested about in kind of how your identity as a painter shows up in this work. And have you done, or do you do work that is purely painting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I've always painted on prints. I mean, I started painting on prints in the days of the iris, which the iris printing, the gouache, it was, and I, because it was water soluble and it was a way to sort of reactivate, like in a kid's coloring book, the image. I think I really love, I wanted to extend the portrait in some way. And I also wanted to put my mark on it. And it was a way, it was almost like, it was a way of going in the back door. It was already an image. And then I wanted to enter into some kind of like dialogue with it through the marking and through the making. And I think that's how it started. I think I've been painting on prints, since the early 80s.
Wow.
And then I do paint, and to the other part of your question, I do just paint. And that's a whole other world.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to see. I mean, this gouache is just beautiful. And is there what is it particularly about gouache that draws you to it? Because I know a lot of people find it a really challenging medium to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clay-like, very much like almost like working, with colored clay in a way. And I love the physicality of it in juxtaposition to, making a print and how those two hook up. I really like that. The different mediums. I think for me, it's just, it really helps me enter into the world of, just having this picture to start with, but then having another medium to play with.
So the portraits in the exhibit, I mean, it's really interesting because so many of them, here and throughout, there's so much kind of obscuring of faces and sort of things that are hidden or masked. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and what the intention behind that is, and kind of what that's saying to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a quote that sticks with me that a professor shared like years ago, and this idea of every veil. He said every veil he applies is a way of unveiling, getting closer. And I think it is that way. It's like, putting something on as to see underneath the thing that sort of transpires from behind. I think that's one of the ways that I like to use that obscurity, is that, it seems to be a part of it. It's just, again, like extending the portrait.
And I know that we kind of talked about this briefly a little while ago, but I'm so interested in just what photographers see when they're taking pictures, and kind of what that, we talked really a little bit about like the difference between what your eyes are seeing and then what your camera is seeing, and how when a photo is going to be, when you're making a photo, like how it's going to be something that you really want to capture. I think that's so, I mean, I imagine you have your camera with you pretty much all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's interesting. It comes in different ways. I mean, sometimes it's like, it's in the seeing, like there's a direct thing. And then sometimes it's later that I didn't, the camera sees something that I didn't see. And then it's like, it's ahead of me. And I think it's more of a revelation, like something's revealed and it's like, wow, or there is that, often, I think often when I'm looking through the camera, it's like, it's there. It's like, it's almost in an instant, you know, I'm moving around. It's like a sensing device.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Right. You're using it to sort of feel your way a little bit.
Yeah.
And how has technology changed your process?
Well, I mean, you know, the size of some of the tintypes that are quite small, you know, once I can scan them and then enlarge them, like 30 by 40, for example, there's a whole other world. I mean, certainly like during that period too, to scan and then see the embroidery and, or the, you know, the fabric of that time. And I really feel like those small, tintypes are like the DNA of photography. You know, it's like, wow, they're like these seeds that have this incredible potential visually in a poetic way by enlarging them. Yeah.
So you said in a poetic way, which is something I also wanted to talk about. Just, you know, I know that you're somebody who is interested in poetry, and if I'm kind of wondering if how, or if you see those, you know, poetry and photography, or poetry in this like way that you're making work, if you see those as related and how they kind of speak to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like there's there's a similar distillation, you know. I think something is distilled. I definitely feel like the way that poetry comes, the way that I would write poetry, that, you know, is that there is this way of it. There's an economic, there's an economy, excuse me, of the heart, you know, like distilling it in a way. And I feel like it's really that kind of poetic imagination that sort of drives the desire to do that.
Yeah, I that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and also I feel like there's so much, or it seems like there's so much kind of deliberation and choice, like the importance of making choices in poetry, like what you're saying about distillation, you know, really getting things down to their marrow. And that, yeah, I can see how you're making a lot of choices in the work that you're doing. And I'm also really interested in how, you know, the work at the museum right now is 3 distinct bodies of work. And is that how you normally work? You work in these kind of discrete, like portfolios or series?
Yeah, I think I've always worked in series from way back. It's sort of how it comes through. And sometimes it can seem like, wow, you know, I'm working on maybe multiple things, but I think eventually, like with my black and white photography, that's like a life project, you know, and I keep editing and editing. I think more with the painting, they become more, you know, distinct series. They have like a beginning and, you know, sort of a resolution. Yeah, so yeah, whatever, you know, like with this, with the apparent close-up, the photogravures, that was just this idea of, you know, being immersed in this residency and, you know, really not knowing. And then it just, you know, just, it happened. It's like, wow. And so it's like, you know, it's like a thread that, that I just kind of run with, you know, and then who knew, you know, like I think did like 70 different gravures. And then it was edited down to 23, but yeah.
And can you just briefly describe the photogravure process for folks?
So the way that we're using it is it's a direct to plate. So there's in our studio, we use the photography system, and so the image is printed on a plate. It's a green mountain plate, and it's called, and it's exposed, and then it's washed out with water, and then exposed and hardened, and then it's ready to ink up. but before you do all of that, you know, it's a digital file. So that digital file can be, you know, a whole archaeology of images that get, you know, compressed into a single image.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, it's wonderful for things like collage or, you know, and you can rephotograph, and you start with that, and it's the process just as, you know, lends itself to that.
And are there standard plate sizes, or can you kind of be a little freewheeling with that?
You can, I think the largest we go up to is 30 by 40. Okay. For that. I haven't done that, but you know, these are, I think the ones that we have that are at the Brattleboro Museum are in the exhibit are around 16 or 11, maybe by 14, something, or a little bit bigger than that. So I think for that process, you know, I mean, I would love to do like a large one, but then there's the inking. So
yeah, I know, I can imagine.
Which was John's part. Yeah. And yeah.
We have a comment from somebody in the audience, Leah Rothstein. Hello, Leah, thanks for being here. And she says, in photography, you're isolating something out of the totality of the surrounding environment. Poetry crystallizes an experience in a similar way, I think, and focuses one's attention. I think that's a really nice way.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's lovely.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I'm curious, and I wanted to just come back to, you mentioned your series of your black and white photography and how that's kind of a life project, something that you've been doing for a while and something that I imagine you'll just always do. And I guess I'm curious about what that what kind of relationship that has to your other work, and what kind of give and take there is, what you learn from having that kind of constant in your life, and how it influences any of the other bodies of work that you're making.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really serves as a guide for me. I remember, you know, growing up, we had this guy come every year with a pony, and he would photograph all the kids in the neighborhood. And I think I have like maybe 12 years of that. And that sort of document, you know, it's kind of like a growth stick. I mean, when I look at the work that I've done in my black and white work, and how it gets edited and updated, and it really lets me see sort of that expanse of time.
Yeah.
So, I keep editing it, and, you know, going through it, and
What's that process like? I mean, when you're editing that, are you doing that digitally? Or are you doing that with prints? How does that work?
I'm doing it with prints, you know. It's like being able to see the whole baseball field at once, you know, who's on first, right? So like, and your whole body's in it, as opposed to just looking at a screen, you know,
And since you've been doing this for a while, so you must have a pretty big collection of images. Are there some that you think, I mean, you know, when you're editing, I'm trying to think about how to say this. Are you ever losing things? Are you ever, you know, getting rid of or taking out things that you've had there for a really long time, because the way that the kind of story of the work has evolved means that those things no longer really fit into that particular narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I do that a lot. And I think part of the editing process is that in editing and seeing the prints that are like, you know, that one has made, that it informs what's going to come. It's almost like it's a way to help, you know, subconsciously, like there's, the next piece, in order to, you know, continue this poetic line, it's informed. but yeah, a lot, I mean, I'm always tossing out things, you know, and it
Yeah.
takes a while to live with things. And, you know, yeah.
And it seems like in a lot of your work, not necessarily the portraits that we have been looking at, but a lot of your work, the natural world has a really big role to play. And I'm kind of wondering how, yeah, how that inspires you, or what you're thinking about when you're out in the world taking pictures, and what sort of things you're seeing or looking for, or if you're not looking, if you just are noticing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's, you know, it's a sensing, knowing when to sort of like, I'm turning left, you know, like on the birds are all flying together and they all like make a left hand.
Yeah.
There's that operating, you know, it's like a very subtle thing. And I think the other thing about like nature is, and I said it today, we had a group in our studio, you know, it's a sacred manuscript, nature, you know, and it is a great teacher. And I feel so grateful to live in the state of Vermont, in this beautiful place, you know, where I have access to it. Yeah. A magnolia tree.
The magnolia tree, exactly. Well, we're just saying, I mean, spring, this is when it's all happening. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
We've got a great question here from Marcy Palmer, who asks, for milking butterflies, how did you decide on the shape and color of the paintings that you do? And also, per the previous comment, what Leah was saying about poetry and photography, I see that balance between what is omitted and what is revealed. So that's something that's fascinating. So how do you decide on the shape and color of the paintings that you're doing?
I mean, it's intuitive again, and you know, it's it evolves. It's sort of like if you were making using clay in your hands, and it's a form. And you know, I sense it, I see it, I begin to develop it, and I mean, I work intuitively. So yeah.
And I'm also curious about the portals, the idea of portals in the work, and how you think of those, and what those mean to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a portal is something that for me, it gives me access to look through, you know, and that can be I mean, literally that's a window, you know, but the face and the portrait for me is like a mirror, you know. I'm able to access that portrait, and it's there, and it allows me to begin the inquiry. I've been chasing after portraits for a long time, and I think for that reason, that there's some kind of access, and I think I mean, even a plant can be a port, you know, like a portal can, I mean, a plant could be a face, right?
Right.
So I think I just see in that way, or I organize in that way.
And so when you say you've been chasing after portraits, is that kind of like it? That sounds to me like it's something that you feel like has been sort of eluding your grasp for a while.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness, because you know, right? Yeah, it's I mean, I think that it's a mystery, you know, but it allows me that imaginative space, that inquiry, you know, that discovery.
And so you're kind of like leaning into the mystery and just sort of letting things unfold a little bit instead of
I think
to pin things down.
Listening to it, right? Yeah, instead of like I mean, I think that's always been the case. Just the way I work is very intuitive, listening visually.
And I know that I think we talked about this a little bit too, but what happens when you get stuck or when you hit some sort of wall? What do you do?
It's really funny. Sorry. I'm laughing because I mean, there's all kinds of things I do. And I think working in different series.
Yeah.
Like, right. So I will, maybe put down the camera and paint or, or read, or just, fret. I mean, I think there's a whole range of emotions, I tend to work all the time. I work a lot. I mean, I think that's always been kind of my practice. But it's in the working that everything happens. Yeah. So at this point, I mean, I think when I was younger, it was much harder. I mean, it was always like, a lot of angst and really, struggling. I mean, which, I'm alive, so I'm struggling. But now, I'm, at this point, it's like, there's this real trust in my process, and also just, finding again in the work through work.
So, but you're also, while you're making your own work, you're kind of also helping facilitate other artists creating. And I think that's kind of interesting. And I wonder if that's something that helps or hinders. I'm not sure how that feels.
I think the dialogue with other artists is really critical.
Yeah.
And inspiring in the way and really necessary, like vitamin B, we have to, and like I have a lot of friendships where it's the dialogue, I mean, we're working and sort of in solidarity and having conversations. And I think it's it's really about sharing. And when one shares the process, it's like, you can glean all these things that are, wow, this is really interesting. And in all the diverse ways that people work.
Yeah. And in terms of processes in general, are alternative processes, is that something that's always kind of drawn you or that you've been attracted to, using these, different alternative photographic processes?
I think because I actually grew up in a print shop, that it happens. I'm interested in everything, I'm interested in hybrids. I love taking, a gravure print and putting it through the inkjet printer, or I just feel like it's whatever is around me, I'm going to use, how would I have, I don't know that I would have, had I not grown up in a print shop, would I be doing these things? But this is how it happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you start taking pictures?
I was in college, and I was painting and studying poetry. Actually, I went to school for music therapy. And I was a voice major and studying opera, but I grew up with Cathy Cone, so it wasn't really working, So I started I used the Diana camera. It was like $5 that I got at the school store. And I had this professor who wanted us to bring all of our images in for critique. And I was mortified because I had really screwed my film up by having too hot of water. And so it was very reticulated. And he said to me, "Do you know the painter Seurat?" And at the time I didn't, but it really was one of those teaching moments where I began to look at photography and painting.
Wow.
And it was just so valuable. I mean, it was such a moment for me where it wasn't critical. It was more like wonder, and so I think that really stuck with me.
That's amazing. That's kind of, that sounds like a really transformative moment that was just like opening a door instead of saying, oh, you got this so wrong. You did this, you made a big mistake. That's really fantastic.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And I was more like, into the digital cameras. Like, so I had a Mavic, which was like a scanner, walking around with a scanner
Oh my
when it
God.
first came out, you know? Yeah, so I love that exploration of, and I think it is that kind of sensing that I like about using the camera.
And are you a person who takes pictures with their phone?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
I love my phone.
Yeah.
I have on my camera in the hot shoe like a little periscope so that I can have my iPhone and my camera. And I feel like the iPhone is like an inverse of a view camera sometimes. It's almost like my navigator. You know, it helps me see. I think the iPhone's brilliant.
I mean, it definitely has changed things so much. Everybody can just have that in their hand all the time. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's sort of like the early photography went. I mean, you can be on the move. You can be on the move with the iPhone, right?
We have another question here from Vicky Stromy, who asks, what do you see as the recurrent themes that run through your various bodies of work?
Oh, current themes. I mean, I think that this self-inquiry, there's definitely through portraiture, you know, psychological, there's surrealism, you know, I mean, to say like, you know, what it is, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I talk a lot about, well, recently conjuring, what, you know, how, you know, what am I doing? And I'm actually putting these things together as to conjure this moment, you know, and it always seems to leave me with something that I didn't have before. It's still like a veil because it's, as you know, it's like a knowing without knowing, you know.
That's interesting. Sure.
Or how somebody will, you know, I had a guide who would say it's, you know, reconciling the irreconcilables. Yeah.
That kind of idea of knowing something without knowing it, and then you being able to kind of manifest, like, you know, visual interpretations of that is a really interesting, really powerful idea. It feels very occult in a way, you know, it feels very, things are happening that you don't really understand, and you're just kind of a conduit in some way, which is really fascinating to think of it that way.
I like the word you just, I like conduit.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's really interesting.
I don't want to, you know, I don't want to illustrate it, in other words. I want to experience it.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Yeah. And I mean, also it seems, certainly with the tintypes, there's that connection with the past that feels really, you know, potent. And again, that idea of conjuring, or kind of being some sort of, you know, intermediary between these people that, you know, you never knew and don't really know what their lives were, but you have these really arresting images that you're kind of, you know, bringing out into the world and interpreting in this way. It's really, really fascinating. They're really beautiful images.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask questions if they have them. These are some really great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. A question that I have that's kind of, I mean, we've sort of touched on it a little bit, but I wonder what prepares you, like what state of mind do you have to be in when you're making your work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I was at a conference recently, and that was the same kind of question, similar. And, you know, one of the presenters said that he needs to drive in his car before he gets into the state. I think it's always different for me, but I mean, sometimes I like have to like, you know, make sure the dishes are in the dishwasher and everything's done. And I'm like there's this sort of process of organizing and clearing, you know, but there's also this kind of awareness on some level about entering into something. It's almost like I'm stepping through a portal. Like this is it's some kind of out of time creative thing. It's hard to really, you know, put into words. But it's like it's an awareness that, oh, this is it. I'm entering into the state.
And is that the same kind of way, same sort of state that you're in when you're editing, or is that a purely like when you're making?
It's a different process with editing, you know, because one's stepping out.
Stepping back. Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, so fascinating. I think it's really interesting to hear about what artists are thinking about or purposely not thinking about when they're making their work, because it feels like, you know, there's so many things going on in everybody's lives, and to have all of that, you know, kind of surrounding you or weighing on you, it would be really challenging to be in a creative space and, you know, be able to hold all of that. So I think it's really interesting that you know, you have to, like, the conditions have to be right. And that's interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting too. And I mean, and the conditions could also be very wrong, you know, right?
Sure.
So wrong or right kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the things that we do, I mean, there is this sort of gathering and incubating and, you know, and then there's a moment where, you know, it connects, you know, it's sort of like having objects in your house that are on your shelf that are apart, and then after 15 years, somehow they looked good together as a piece of sculpture, you know?
Right.
It's like, what's that about? I don't know. It's almost shamanic.
Right. And, you know, obviously when you first brought them into your house or your studio, that wasn't, you know, the idea, but then all of a sudden they kind of coalesce in that way. That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's like the collecting of tintypes. You don't know what's going to happen with them. So how many do you have at this point?
I think I probably have about 3,000, maybe.
Oh my gosh. That's
and they're I mean, and they're beautiful and they're small. So, you know, it's not like you need a lot of space for them. You know, but they're and often they'll be writing on the back, you know. I mean, there are all these, you know, they're treasures, and they really, sometimes they do feel like, oh wow, I know this person, you know. They're sort of like recycled, you know, we're recycled spirits in a way. So yeah, I find them just beautiful objects.
And when you're kind of, I mean, have you scanned all of them? Do they exist?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very particular about which ones I do, and I love. The other thing is they have this wonderful patina of time on them, you know. And you know, people, you know, when they were during the tintypes, you know, they were kept close to the heart in the pocket, you know, of a loved one. So I feel all of that too it's not visible, but it is, you know, that layer of history of time is also something in the scan.
Yeah. And I mean, I imagine when you're collecting them, they're in those little frames, right? So is that what you have You have thousands of those.
I've got frames. I've got, sometimes they're not in frames. Sometimes they're in albums. And these very ornate books. Yeah.
Wow. Let's see, we have another question here from Maureen Manning, who asks, can you tell me about the portrait of the man with the ants?
Ant-Man.
Yeah, the unofficial title.
Yeah, I mean, I think a sense of humor is important. And I love ants. I mean, I had an ant farm, and just to photograph it. I mean, I think they are these beautiful kind of, they have this beautiful calligraphy, their bodies, you know, and I was saying to a friend, you know, Solomon stopped his army for, you know, one ant. So, I mean, they're incredible, you know, creatures. And when I used them on the portrait, I felt like it was just something, you know, it was just like a tickle. It was a way of expressing. It's like, yeah, it's like a tickle. And it's like a mark.
Yeah. Right.
Another way of making a mark.
Leah asks, could Cathy please tell us again about the periscope device she has for her iPhone? Does that attach to the hot shoe of your regular camera?
Yes. Yeah. I love this. You can, I have to, I'm not sure where I mean, I got it a long time ago, but what it allows me to do is really to sort of focus in on what I want to move in on with my other camera. And yeah, I think it's an incredible way of using both. And so I find myself taking often an iPhone shot of the thing that I'm, you know, shooting with my Sony. So I'm sure you can still get it, but it's a great tool.
Are there other tools, kind of specialist tools like that you like to use?
No, I mean, I'll make props. I like making props. And then, you know, where I live, I will put them out in the woods, or I'll put them against a tree. I mean, I love these kinds of things, and they just live there. And then, and some, you know, I'll visit them. They're sort of like, oh yeah, okay, is it? And at times they work, you know, but I do find myself making a lot of props.
Oh, that's interesting. Just with what you have on hand in the moment, or well.
Yes, it's usually that. It's usually that.
That's interesting. A lot of on-the-spot problem solving. That's really fascinating. I want to also mention that there is a catalog that accompanies the exhibit. It's a beautiful catalog that Cathy put together, and you can find it. It's available at the museum, obviously, but also on the online gift shop, which you can find via the museum's website. And it's really fantastic. And so I just was thinking of that as we were talking about the Ant-Man, and how, you know, I hope that everybody will be able to come and see the show in person, because it's really fabulous to be surrounded by all of these portraits. But for those who might not be able to, there is a catalog, and there's also a virtual tour that you can see on the website as well. So there are a bunch of different ways to experience the work. But I just want to see if anyone has any more questions. And yes, we have Petey Mitchell. Hello, Petey. Petey asks, do you have another intriguing project in your creative hopper that is exciting to you? Oh, that's a good question.
That's a good question. I'm sure it's in the hopper. I don't know when it's going to hop out, but I can hop with it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always working. I do have a couple of new things I'm working on. So yeah.
Yeah. How, and that's an interesting question, actually. How how do you talk about the work that you're in process with? Like, do you share about it while you're making it, or is it the sort of thing that you kind of do on your own and kind of, close yourself away for a little bit and then let people in on it? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I develop it first before, I could share it,
Yeah.
but I will often have conversations, with friends
Yeah.
in process about the things that I'm thinking about, or questioning or researching, in conjunction with whatever I'm making.
Yeah. And Vaughn Trackman, hello Vaughn, we have lots of great people in the audience tonight. Vaughn says, you're so prolific and all of your series are so beautiful. How many series do you work on at a time?
I'm usually working on 2 or 3 series at a time.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Huh. And I guess that kind of goes back to the, when you get stuck, you can kind of pivot to something else and give your brain a bit of a breather from one thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to like having a garden and growing, peas and asparagus, and you've got some berries over here, and you're cultivating these different things. I feel like that really nourishes me. I don't set out to do a project. Like I was saying earlier, I discover it in the making. And so sometimes something that I will discover in painting is something that then informs the photography and nourish, helps me develop that in a different way. Yeah.
And when you're not working, which I know is almost never, are you excited to get back to it? I mean, is that something that you're just always, it kind of is an itch that you need to have scratched?
Yeah, I think it's part of, I think I'm always gathering, and I'll see something that it's like, okay, I'm going to go back and revisit that. Like I'm noting what time of day it is that wonderful thing happened. Will it happen? Just that kind of thing, always sort of bookmarking and looking and
That actually reminds me of something that I'm curious about is photographers have such an interesting relationship to light, and I think notice it in such a different way and so much more than most people do. And I wonder if that's something that's a really big part of your work, or if it's something that you kind of, it happens but you're not thinking about it constantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to that sensing. It's like there's a quality of light, and qualities, and I think that I'm interested in pursuing like a quality light.
Yeah, not a specific image, but just a certain. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of what you're talking about is so intangible, and I keep kind of like making these little motions with my hands. Because it feels like something that you're, it's there, but you just can't really grasp it. It's really interesting. It feels so elusive.
Yeah, there's I did a series once called Grasp the Sparrow's Tail, which is a Tai Chi term. And the idea of, and even with a parent close up, it's the closer you get to the horizon line, the further it recedes,
The always searching, always kind of, chasing something. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, thank you so much, Cathy. That was really fantastic.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So thrilled and honored, and just really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I hope that everybody gets to come to the museum to see the show, and also Cathy is kind of a Brattleboro star right now. She also has a piece up in a show at the Vermont Center for Photography. So you can catch her in both places. Have a really It's really great series of work up right now. Oh, thanks. And yeah, Vicki just passes along her thanks, saying, thanks so much for sharing your work and your introspective, reflective process. And, you know, I echo that, absolutely.
Thank you so much. All the questions were wonderful, and thank you again.
Really great questions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. And please come and see the show before it closes on June 11th. Yeah, and take care. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.